Let me ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself here.
Ooh, setting the bar high right out of the gate.
I am. So, how often do you eat chocolate?
That is a very pointed question.
Right, I mean it. Like, really think about it for a second. Is it a daily habit?
Or maybe a weekend reward.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you've got that secret stash in your desk drawer.
Oh, the one you turn to when the afternoon slump hits?
We all have one. Or maybe it's that one specific bar you grab in the checkout aisle after just a particularly exhausting week.
Right, it's an impulse buy.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Because if you are anything like the vast majority of people listening to this deep dive right now, chocolate is not just a snack.
No, not at all.
It is an experience. It's
Yeah.
this deeply ingrained, almost cultural comfort food.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at the dietary habits across the continent, chocolate is undeniably one of the absolute most loved sweet treats in all of Europe.
Hands down.
It's woven into holidays, into celebrations, and just those everyday moments of relief.
But what if I told you that the simple, mindless act of buying that favorite chocolate bar is about to undergo a massive systemic shock?
A huge shock,
Yeah, and potentially become a whole lot more expensive.
which completely upends our relationship with something we consider basically a rite of indulgence.
It really does.
We have this incredibly intimate, deeply personal relationship with a product that, for most of us, is just a shiny wrapper on a grocery store shelf.
Right, we just pick it up and buy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't think about the global infrastructure required to put it there.
Yeah.
But behind that wrapper is a vast, complex, and currently highly stressed global system.
Which brings us to our mission today.
Yes.
Because the dynamic we are untangling today stems from this fascinating piece of analysis we have. It's aptly titled The Bitter Cost of Ethical Cocoa.
And that title alone, I mean, it is a masterclass in framing a paradox.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because right away there is this massive tension here.
Oh, definitely.
We are looking at a situation where a brand new sweeping European Union law has been introduced.
A massive piece of legislation.
Right. And it's a law designed with the explicit goal of making the chocolate industry fundamentally more, quote unquote, ethical.
Which sounds great on paper.
It sounds amazing.
Mm.
But on one side, we have Europe's immense, almost insatiable demand for chocolate, a market worth billions.
Billions and billions.
And on the other side, we have this heavy hand of new European Union legislation descending on the industry.
And the direct consequence of this legislation could be a significant spike in the price of your everyday sweet treat.
Which hurts the wallet.
It does. But along with that, there is some severe collateral damage to the people it theoretically aims to protect.
And that is exactly what we need to explore today, the hidden friction behind this new law.
Because it's not as simple as just declaring an industry ethical.
Not at all. We're looking at accounts from an actual business owner who operates small cocoa farms in cocoa-producing regions.
Right, the people actually on the ground.
Yeah, and they are openly sharing some very deep, frankly, existential concerns about this legislation.
It's a genuine fear for their livelihood.
It is. And then on the flip side of that, we have interviews with everyday chocolate lovers.
People just like you, listening right now.
Exactly. People grappling with the reality of whether they would actually pay more for their favorite treat if it meant complying with these new rules.
And to truly grasp the scale of this friction, we have to recognize the sheer gravity of what an EU law actually represents on the global stage.
Right, because it's not just a local ordinance.
No, the European Union is not just a regional market. It is a massive economic superpower.
Huge.
So when the EU decides to legislate how a product must be sourced to be considered ethical, they are not just issuing a polite suggestion to the agricultural sector.
They're not just saying, hey, try to do better.
Exactly. They are fundamentally altering the rules of the game for the entire global supply chain.
Which creates that paradox.
Yes, the bitter cost. It's the violent collision between the abstract, highly polished concept of ethics debated in a sterile legislative chamber in Brussels,
Right.
and the concrete, muddy, day-to-day reality of the people actually growing the cocoa on small rural farms thousands of miles away.
That collision right there between the legislative chamber and the dirt of the actual farm, that is exactly where this whole system seems to buckle.
It's where the theory meets the reality.
Let's look at that business owner running these small cocoa farms. On paper, if you are a lawmaker, you assume an ethical cocoa law would be celebrated by farmers.
You would think so, yeah.
Right. You'd think the reaction on the ground would be this collective sigh of relief.
Like, finally we're being protected.
Exactly, that finally their labor is being recognized, supported, and protected from exploitation.
But that is not what is happening.
Not at all. Instead, this business owner is actively sharing profound concerns about the new law.
They are worried.
And I have to admit, my initial reaction to reading that was just pure confusion.
It seems counterintuitive.
Totally. I was thinking, why on earth would a small farmer be terrified of a law that is ostensibly meant to clean up their industry?
Well, let's play devil's advocate for the EU lawmakers for a moment.
Okay, let's do it.
They aren't passing these laws to maliciously drown small farmers in red tape. That's not the goal.
No, nobody sits down and says, let's ruin some small businesses today.
Right. They are doing this because historically, without massive, sweeping regulatory frameworks, labor exploitation and environmental degradation can just run rampant in global supply chains.
Which is a very real problem.
It is. So the lawmakers' problem isn't bad intentions.
So what is the problem then?
The problem is that applying a rigid, one-size-fits-all legal framework to a wildly decentralized, low-tech farming network creates massive collateral damage.
Ah, collateral damage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to examine the actual mechanics of compliance.
Right. How do you actually prove you're following the law?
Exactly. When a governing body like the EU passes an ethical sourcing law, the law doesn't just ask for a promise.
You can't just cross your heart.
No, it demands empirical proof. It requires end-to-end traceability.
Which means data.
A lot of data. It mandates digital tracking, audits, legal documentation, and just a massive amount of administrative overhead.
Just to prove you're doing what they asked?
Yes, to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the cocoa was grown according to their highly specific standards.
And there's the mechanism of failure. I mean, it's like trying to regulate a neighborhood bake sale using the corporate tax code.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right, because those rules might make perfect logical sense if you are regulating a multinational agricultural conglomerate.
Sure, company with a whole floor of lawyers in Geneva.
Exactly, they can handle it. But if you apply those exact same reporting standards to a farmer with just a small plot of land,
It changes everything.
the burden of compliance suddenly becomes heavier than the actual harvest.
It outweighs the actual work of farming.
Imagine you are this business owner. You know your soil. You know the weather patterns. You know exactly how to yield a great cocoa crop.
You're an expert at your craft.
Right. But suddenly, to sell your beans to Europe, being a skilled farmer is entirely irrelevant.
It's not enough anymore.
Not at all. Now, you need to be a data analyst. You need to be a compliance officer, a supply chain auditor.
You have to become a bureaucrat.
Yes. You have to prove on digital paper to a continent thousands of miles away that you are adhering to their specific definition of the right way to farm.
And that is the absolute essence of regulatory friction.
It just grinds everything to a halt.
Because the burden of proof in these sweeping legislative changes almost invariably flows downward,
Right down to the bottom.
eventually landing squarely on the shoulders of the producer
Yeah.
at the absolute bottom of the supply chain.
Who is the least equipped to handle it?
Exactly. For a massive corporate farm, a new EU compliance law is just, an administrative line item.
Just a cost of doing business.
Right. They hire a few more compliance officers, they build out their software infrastructure, and they just absorb the friction.
But for the small business owner mentioned in our analysis,
That same law acts as an accidental, highly regressive tax on simply existing as a small entity.
just existing becomes too expensive.
Yes. They are looking at the new requirements and realizing that the sheer cost of proving their ethics, the software, the internet access, the legal translations, the auditing fees,
All of that adds up.
it might literally bankrupt them, even if their day-to-day farming practices are already perfectly pristine.
So what does this all mean for the small-scale farmer trying to survive?
It forces them into a corner.
If I am that small business owner and I am sitting at my kitchen table running the numbers, and I realize that the cost of proving I am ethical to the EU completely wipes out my profit margin,
What do you do?
I am faced with an impossible choice. I either consolidate, sell my farm to a massive corporation that can afford all this paperwork.
Which defeats the purpose of being an independent farmer.
Exactly. Or I just stop selling to Europe entirely and pivot to a market that asks fewer questions.
And that is happening.
It feels like the tragic irony here is that an ethical law designed to protect the vulnerable might inadvertently act as this aggressive filter that simply eradicates the small, independent farmer from the global market.
Precisely. You are identifying the exact mechanism by which well-intentioned regulation actually drives corporate consolidation.
It creates monopolies by accident.
Exactly. The business owner's concern isn't a rejection of ethical farming.
No, they want to be ethical.
It is a desperate plea against a system that penalizes them purely for lacking administrative scale.
Wow.
And if a significant portion of these small farms are pushed out of the European market because the barrier to entry is now just too high.
We see a dramatic shift in the macroeconomic landscape.
We do. The total volume of compliant legal cocoa allowed into the European Union inevitably shrinks.
Supply goes down.
Yes, and when a massive continent-wide demand remains static, but the supply of legally compliant goods plummets,
Economics 101.
the economic outcome is entirely predictable.
The cost of producing that compliant cocoa skyrockets.
It goes through the roof.
And that financial weight, it doesn't just evaporate into the ether, it travels.
It has to go somewhere.
It moves from the heavy administrative overhead of the surviving farms, gets baked into the margins of the international buyers.
Then it gets absorbed and amplified by the chocolate manufacturers.
Right, and it continues its journey all the way up the chain.
Until it lands heavily in one very specific, very familiar place.
The grocery store checkout aisle.
Exactly.
Which brings us right back to you, the listener, standing there with your wallet.
Because if the farmers are drowning in compliance costs and the production becomes significantly more expensive, that entire bureaucratic apparatus is ultimately funded by the consumer.
We are the ones paying for the paperwork.
Yes, we are.
And here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at how everyday chocolate lovers are reacting to this, we hit a fascinating psychological wall.
It really is fascinating.
Because the analysis zeroes in on interviews with consumers, probing them with two very specific, very uncomfortable questions.
Uncomfortable is the right word.
First, would they be willing to pay more for their favorite chocolate to ensure it meets these new ethical standards?
Right.
And second, do they ever actually look at where their chocolate is produced?
The consumer perspective is arguably the most complex and contradictory part of this entire puzzle.
Totally. Let's unpack that first question regarding the willingness to pay a higher price.
What's fascinating here is the classic trap of what behavioral economists call stated versus revealed preferences.
Oh, I love this concept. Explain that for a second.
It is the fundamental difference between the ethical consumer we claim to be in a vacuum.
When someone has a microphone in our face.
Exactly. Versus the tired, financially constrained consumer we actually are in reality.
Right.
When an interviewer stops a chocolate lover on the street and asks, would you pay a premium to ensure no one was exploited to make this treat?
The stated preference is almost universally yes.
Of course it is. Our self-image demands that we answer affirmatively.
We want to believe we are the good guys.
We want to believe we are the kind of people who value human dignity over a cheap sugar rush.
But the revealed preference, what we actually do when we are standing there scanning the shelf, tells a completely different story.
A very different story.
It is so easy to be ethical in the abstract.
It is.
It's like buying your morning coffee.
All right.
If someone asks if you support fair wages for coffee farmers, of course you do. Everyone does.
Nobody says no to that.
But when it's 7:30 a.m., you are rushing to work, you are exhausted, and you see that your usual medium roast just jumped $2 in price to cover a new compliance tax.
Suddenly it's a different conversation.
Suddenly, your abstract ethical framework is in a brutal boxing match with your actual finite bank account.
Usually the bank account wins.
Yeah. And for decades, the chocolate industry has deliberately shielded the consumer from this exact moral friction.
That shielding is a crucial point.
Right.
Because the entire marketing apparatus of the chocolate industry has been built on the concept of pure, unadulterated escapism.
Escapism, yes.
Chocolate is sold to us as a reward.
You deserve a break today.
Exactly. It is tied to holidays, to romance, to childhood nostalgia, to just these small moments of personal comfort.
The appeal of a sweet treat is that it is supposed to be a momentary vacation from the heavy, grinding realities of the world.
Yes, but by legally forcing the supply chain to account for its ethical footprint and subsequently driving up the price, this new EU law is effectively shattering that illusion.
It's tearing the Band-Aid off.
It takes the geopolitical and economic reality of the small cocoa farm and prints it directly onto the price tag.
Wow.
It forces the consumer to ingest the weight of the global supply chain right along with their sugar.
And that transition from innocent comfort food to this morally weighted purchase brings us to the second question from the consumer interviews.
Which is,
do you ever actually look at where your chocolate is produced?
the answer is usually no.
Right. Now, I consider myself a fairly informed person. I try to be conscious of what I consume.
As do I.
But if I am being brutally honest, when I am buying chocolate, I almost never check the origin label.
Very few people do.
Because the grocery store is an incredibly overwhelming environment.
You're just trying to get in and out.
Yeah, you are making hundreds of micro decisions based on price, brand loyalty, and just immediate cravings.
If we had to deeply research the geopolitical origin and administrative compliance of every single item we put in our cart,
We would be paralyzed.
we would literally never leave the store.
It is a systemic blindness that modern commerce basically relies upon.
It does. The fast physical and psychological distance between the origin of a product and the final consumer is what allows us to enjoy the chocolate without feeling the friction of the labor that produced it.
We don't want to think about the labor.
No. And the EU law acts as a forceful legislative attempt to close that gap.
Right. By mandating ethical sourcing and pushing the resulting costs onto the consumer, the law acts as a wake-up call.
Demanding that the buyer acknowledge the process, not just the product.
But I want to push back on what that wake-up call actually achieves for the consumer.
Oh, what do you mean?
Let's say a chocolate lover does change their behavior.
Right.
Let's say they flip the bar over, look at the origin label, see the new, higher price, and decide to pay it because they genuinely want to support ethical practices.
A noble choice.
Sure. But what does that label actually tell them?
Not much, honestly.
It doesn't tell them if the specific small business owner we discussed earlier is thriving, or if they are drowning under a mountain of EU compliance paperwork.
No, it doesn't.
A label on a wrapper is an incredibly low-resolution piece of information.
And that is the ultimate tragedy of the asymmetry of information in global markets.
Asymmetry of information.
Right. Because even the most well-intentioned, highly motivated chocolate lover who willingly absorbs the higher price at the checkout counter
They pay the extra money.
has absolutely no real way of knowing where that extra capital is actually going.
Wait, really?
Really? Are they paying an ethics premium that translates into better equipment and a higher quality of life for the farmer?
That's what we want to believe.
Of course.
Yeah.
Or is that extra money simply being absorbed by the massive administrative vacuum required to prove compliance?
Oh, wow.
It is entirely possible, and frankly quite likely, that the consumers is paying a premium that only funds the bureaucracy.
The software developers, the legal translators, the European auditors.
Exactly, while the actual farmer, at the bottom of the chain, sees none of the financial benefit.
Yet bears all of the administrative burden.
Yes,
Wow. Okay, that entirely recontextualizes the title of our source material.
the bitter cost.
The bitter cost. Exactly. The consumer is paying more, feeling the pinch in their wallet, but they justify it with a little warmth in their heart, assuming they did a good deed.
They think they bought an ethical outcome.
But meanwhile, back in the cocoa-producing region, the small business owner is still terrified, pulling their hair out trying to navigate a labyrinth of digital forms just to prove they deserve access to the market.
It's heartbreaking when you really look at it.
The consumer's extra money didn't buy a better world. It just bought a more heavily audited one.
Which highlights the profound limitations of using blunt legislative instruments to perform delicate economic surgery.
That's a great way to put it, delicate economic surgery.
You have a centralized authority attempting to mandate morality across vast geographic distances and wildly divergent economic realities.
And the intention is fundamentally noble, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The intention is to create an unwavering standard of ethics that protects human rights.
No one is arguing against that.
But the mechanism of enforcement relies on imposing a rigid, highly bureaucratic framework onto a flexible, fragile, and often informal agricultural reality.
And the small business owner is caught in the crossfire.
They are. They are not ideologically opposed to ethics.
They are structurally opposed to a system that equates ethics with the ability to afford endless paperwork.
Exactly.
And the everyday chocolate lovers interviewed in the analysis, they're caught in the crossfire as well.
They're paying the bill.
Right. They are being conscripted to fit the bill for this massive systemic shift without any real guarantee or transparency that their increased spending is actually solving the human problem they think they are addressing.
It really strips away the innocence of the entire transaction.
It totally does. You aren't just walking into a store and buying sugar and cocoa anymore.
No, by purchasing a simple, sweet treat under this new legal framework, you are inadvertently participating in a massive, fraught geopolitical debate.
A debate about compliance, economic scale, and moral responsibility.
And this forces us to reckon with a permanent cultural shift.
A shift away from cheap indulgence.
Europe loves this sweet treat. It is deeply, inextricably embedded in the cultural fabric. But the era of cheap, consequence-free indulgence is rapidly drawing to a close.
It's over.
The new EU law is a glaring signal that the hidden costs of production, the labor conditions, the environmental impact, the systemic inequalities.
They can no longer remain safely hidden off balance sheet.
No, they must be accounted for, quantified, and proven. And accounting for things, especially on a global scale, costs an exorbitant amount of money.
We are transitioning out of a world where the only metrics that matter to the consumer were taste and price.
And moving into a reality where geopolitical origin, systemic ethics, and strict legislative compliance are permanently baked into the cost of the product.
So we have untangled quite a massive web today.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
We started with a very simple, visceral question about how often you eat chocolate.
Right.
And we've journeyed through some incredibly thorny philosophical and economic territory.
To say the least.
We looked at Europe's massive cultural demand for this beloved treat. We examined the heavy, blunt instrument of new EU laws designed to forcibly mandate ethical standards across the globe.
The ripple effects of which are just staggering.
Truly. We dove deeply into the very real, very pressing concerns of the small business owners and cocoa farmers who suddenly find themselves forced to navigate a labyrinth of administrative compliance just to survive in their own industry.
The people on the ground doing the actual work.
Yes. And finally, we turn the mirror back on ourselves, looking at the everyday chocolate lovers, trying to reconcile their desire for a cheap, comforting treat with the dawning, uncomfortable realization that they are going to have to pay a steep price for their conscience.
It represents a fundamental maturation in how we must understand our relationship with the things we consume.
The illusion of the simple transaction is gone.
It is entirely gone.
Exactly. So the next time you are standing in the grocery store aisle, tired after a long day, and you reach for your favorite chocolate bar.
Just pause for a second.
Yeah. I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to look at that shiny wrapper and think about the incredible, fraught journey that little rectangle of sweetness has been on.
It's quite a journey.
From the soil of a small farm, navigated by a deeply concerned business owner trying to decode foreign regulations.
Through the massive, sterile legislative halls of the European Union.
All the way to your hands. Every everyday item has an immensely complex story attached to it. Nothing is as simple as it seems on the surface.
And sometimes, the overarching desire to do the right thing carries a surprisingly bitter cost.
A bitter cost indeed.
This raises an important question, though.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if ethical laws make everyday treats like chocolate significantly more expensive, do we risk a future where ethical consumption becomes a luxury that only the wealthy can afford, while everyone else is priced out of having a clean conscience?